Why do we not bring up Edgar Wright's name more often when we're talking about the best directors working today? I genuinely believe he is one of them. So today we're going to talk his filmography. I need your lists down below. What is your favorite Edgar Wright film? This is all, of course, in honor of Last Night in Soho, my review on this channel already. But let's get into this list. Of course, if you guys are joining me and you like these tier lists and you'd like to see more, maybe like a Wes Anderson tier list, drop your thumbs up down below. On today's list, we're going to be kind of focusing on one specific category, and that is his narrative feature films, because he's directed shorts. Of course, he had Sparks Brothers documentary, but we're just going to focus on his, I believe, 7 narrative features? Yeah, 7. A lot of people often forget about his very first movie, and we're going to start with that one. This movie is called Fistful of Fingers. You ever heard of this? Austin, what is that? Well, it's a spoof film directed by Edgar Wright in 1995. It follows the exploits of a no-name hero and his stereotypical Indian sidekick as they search for the nefarious villain, the Squint. And that was the summary on Letterboxd and IMDb. I saw that and I said, all right, what is this? What is this movie going to be? What's it going to be about? And of course, A Fistful of Fingers, clearly spoofing something like A Fistful of Dollars, and those classic Western tropes, both the interactions of the characters, the awkwardness of the situations that's really explored in this film, and a very low budget. And we're talking, oftentimes directors, they have these first films, but they're usually under the banner of some sort of studio, right? This is not the case. This is Edgar Wright's, it looks at least, his first foray into filmmaking. And unfortunately, you can tell at times, both based off of the script and just the way the movie's kind of put together. Now, it isn't all bad, and I could see exactly what he was trying to do here. You think of a movie like Spaceballs, what that does to Star Wars. He was attempting to do that with the Western genre, but because there was such a stranglehold on what he could do because of budget, maybe some of the acting wasn't the best. You get some of the most awkward moments you could imagine in a movie. And that kind of humor, we've seen it transfer into something like Hot Fuzz and Shaun of the Dead over the years. So the roots of what he turns into as a director, they're absolutely present here. It's just, it wasn't handled near as well as his other movies. But again, that's understandable. There is some heart and charm to this film. Absolutely, and that quirkiness could get a lot of people on board. Unfortunately, because it just didn't quite work for me, I am going to put this film, his very first film, Fistful of Fingers, on the meh tier. I wasn't entirely on board with what it was doing. What is it? What is it? Yeah? I'm in the middle of a video, pal. What are you doing? Wait. Oh, okay. All right. Oh, God. Hey, man, he usually doesn't like it when I'm recording. Hello? Are you hungry? Oh, goodness. Oh, goodness. Oh, goodness. What is wrong with you? All right. Well, we're taking a break. Do you not like the fact that I'm recording? You hungry? You want a treat? You want a treat? You want a treat? Yeah. That's what he wanted. He's just staring at me. All right, let's get you a treat. Next up, Scott Pilgrim versus the World. One of the best, no, you know what? The best video game movie ever made, but it's kind of cheating because it's not technically. Oh, wait, yeah, Scott Pilgrim, the best video game movie ever made. I'm going to say it and just, I know this movie doesn't work for everyone. I've met a lot of people who just do not enjoy the way this film handles its humor and that quirkiness, that awkwardness, but what the story actually is. And in that way, it is a beautiful love story, a bit of a love triangle, of course, between Scott, Ramona Flowers, and Knives Chow. But the supporting cast is one of the best. I mean, Kieran Culkin is always a highlight for me. Jason Schwartzman is good. And of course, all of the evil exes, Chris Evans, Brandon Routh. The cast is stacked. Aubrey Plaza's in there. Anna Kendrick's in there. And the fact that it's laid out like a video game, going from boss battle to boss battle, getting some of the coolest action scenes you'll ever see in a movie like this, but handled with that awkward style and sensibility that Edgar Wright is known for, but transferred a little bit, a lot less British humor, a lot more kind of in-your-face moments. But it's really funny, man. And I'll admit, at first, this film, very first time watching it, I'm sitting back going, I don't know if I love this as much as everyone else. But the more I watch it, and as you get into that third act, just the first time watching it, I'm like, okay, I'm completely on board. But the more I go back and rewatch Scott Pilgrim, it works unbelievably well. And it's so distinct from the Cornetto trilogy. It's so distinct from something like Baby Driver. Can you tell? I love this film. It's going on the awesome tier. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Good job, Scott. And here's another one, Baby Driver. This movie is all about style. Not style over substance, because the substance is there. I think the story is interesting. It's, again, so different from what we know from Edgar Wright. It's about this incredibly talented young getaway driver who finds himself taking part in a heist that is doomed to fail, and he kind of gets pulled into working for this crime boss. Ansel Elgort, of course, plays Baby, a.k.a. Miles. Lily James, John Hamm, Jamie Foxx, John Bernthal, of course, who else. But I love this movie. It's one that everybody was talking about because the way it matches the music up to the pacing of the film. And you get a beautiful picture of what that's going to be in that opening scene of Baby kind of walking down the street and everything just falling into place perfectly. And that is so different from anything else that we have gotten. All right, we've seen heist films before. We've seen the hero's, or in this case, somewhat of a hero's journey, and he has to get the girl, he has to do this, he has to take down the bad guys, a couple of twists and turns in there as well. So just forgetting about how cool the style of the movie is, I think the story, while a bit conventional, works well. A lot of that has to do with the cast, extremely compelling, and you also have just an awesome character at the center, but then you bring in all of those other things, and the cinematography, the color correction, it's all just so pleasing, visually pleasing. Baby Driver comes together to create one of the more unique experiences of that year. Absolutely. It was one of my favorites of 2017. It's always a lot of fun to go back and revisit. It's definitely one of the more mainstream movies he's done as a director, I guess appealing to a more wide audience than some of his pure comedies. But that comedy, while still there, it is overshadowed by some of the action beats and, of course, the integration of music here. But I don't mind that. Again, I love Edgar Wright going off and doing something different. This is all, of course, in honor of Soho, and that's so different from this, which is so different from Scott Pilgrim. But regardless, I think this movie is absolutely awesome. I loved Baby Driver. I continue to love Baby Driver. He's on a roll. Let's see what else we got. Okay, y'all know what time it is. Don't stop me now. It's Shaun of the Dead. I love this movie. In terms of zombie films, and a lot of people don't want to include this because, it's a comedy. It's a spoof. Again, working with and through satire. That's what he tried to do with Fistful of Fingers. That's what he does with Hot Fuzz. That's what he does with Shaun of the Dead. And, oh my God, the seeds were planted in his first film. But this movie does everything right. Like, I can't necessarily think of a major flaw. Maybe one or two of the jokes don't land, but, you team Edgar Wright up with Nick Frost and Simon Pegg, you automatically know you're in for a win. Where did that start from? This film, that relationship between the two, and then, of course, what happens to Ed, but Shaun's relationships, not only with Ed, trying to get him motivated. We need to get off the couch and do something. I need to do something with my life. That mentality carries on throughout the film, kind of turning Shaun into that hero of sorts, but also his love life, that relationship, where that goes, the sadness that you feel through him, what he has to go through, what they have to go through fighting these zombies. First of all, realizing that there is a zombie apocalypse, because it takes some bit to get there. I love the artistry behind repeating certain scenes in different ways and using cinematography to show us how creative he can be as a director. You guys know the scenes that I'm talking about when he's walking to the store and getting a drink the first time and the second time. That's always one of my favorite things to go back and revisit. There's a video on YouTube that I believe compares that beautifully, but beyond that, it's the first time we see him use music to match the beats of the action scene. It's the first time we see him do all of these things that carry over brilliantly into other movies, but it may just be the best we've ever seen from him in Shaun of the Dead. And it's so rare that your first major feature film is that good. Shaun of the Dead is not good. You know what? Shaun of the Dead is not even awesome for me. Let's do this. I have to put Shaun of the Dead on the all-time tier. if I can spell it, Al time. Yeah, this is an all-timer for me. It's one of the best comedies I've ever seen, no doubt in my mind. I love it so much. And you know what? Let's just get this out of the way. Let's delete that bad tier. Let's delete that awful tier. Come on, he's never directed an awful movie. We've spoofed zombies. Let's spoof buddy cop movies and bring in the exact same people from Shaun of the Dead, in Simon Pegg playing Nicholas, in Nick Frost playing Danny, and of course, surrounding them by a ridiculous amount of talent. Bill Bailey and Carl Johnson and Timothy Dalton, oh my God. And Nicholas, who is a former London constable, is finding it difficult to accept his new assignment in this very tired, old, sleepy British village of Sanford. Not only does he miss the excitement of the big city, but he also has a well-meaning oaf for a partner. But when things start to go a bit crazy and all of these accidents are rocking this town, Angel smells something rotten in this village that seems so simple on its surface. So not only spoofing buddy cop movies, but it gets a lot deeper, a lot more intense, and a lot crazier and cultier than that. I think Hot Fuzz is up there with the best of the best in terms of satires and spoofs. Obviously, Shaun of the Dead being one of the greatest ones ever. But once you get into what Hot Fuzz is doing, two very different character dynamics, comparing Hot Fuzz to Shaun of the Dead. You know, Nicholas is a more confident and aware character, so he's seeing all of these things happen that some of the others, Nick Frost included, I guess his character similar to what he's played in the past, they're not noticing the craziness of their surrounding elements, if that makes sense. So once this mission starts, and we start to see how wild this town actually is, okay? Pulling back the layers of this story, it's brilliant. And again, that trademark humor, that sarcastic, dry, witty humor that is at play in Shaun of the Dead, but I think it's actually better in Hot Fuzz. I think Hot Fuzz is funnier. It's so upbeat, and that style I love. I wish more movies had this style. I understand it's a very specific style, but what Edgar Wright is able to do to have you cracking up, but at the same time, you are worried because anything could happen to any character, and that's proven here once again. Lots of violence in both movies. I am a massive fan of Hot Fuzz. And you know what I'll say? This was going on the great tier. I went back and rewatched it before this list, and screw it. It's going on the awesome tier. I think this movie, it gets better every time I watch it. I think Hot Fuzz, look at this list. Look at Edgar Wright as a director. It's ridiculous. All right, The World's End. This one gets unfairly hated on, in my opinion. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that it's lower down the Edgar Wright lists across the board because it doesn't quite have that magic. It doesn't quite have that cohesive script like a Hot Fuzz or Shaun of the Dead. And even though we are technically comparing movies on this list, oopsie, that's what we're doing. I don't want to look at it and say, well, it's just not as good. That means it's not a very good movie. This movie may be the most insane of all of them just because of where it progresses. You have five friends reuniting in an attempt to top their epic pub crawl from 20 years earlier. But of course, things are going crazy, and they become humanity's only hope for survival. This cast, Martin Freeman, of course, Pegg and Frost, and Rosamund Pike in this movie, Pierce Brosnan. I mean, come on, the cast is amazing, but again, everything hits the fan. We've done zombies, we've done this cult. What else can we do here? Oh, okay. We're going full sci-fi in this movie. We're going crazy. This big apocalyptic, wild, exciting film that does unnerve you and also upset you, right? Their relationships, what they're kind of doing to themselves. But in the process, each person, this movie's a lot different because you have five characters you have to handle and at one time or another make them the lead of that part of the story. Each character is going through something. And then you watch what happens, the stakes continue to raise throughout the film because you start to realize no one is safe. And that's the case for all of his movies, but this one in particular, no one is safe. And this film becomes, I believe, the most emotional of the entire trilogy at points because of what characters are having to deal with. The humor, while really good, and I thoroughly enjoyed a handful of scenes between the five, and then others come in and others filter out, but it may not be as well handled as something like a Hot Fuzz or a Shaun of the Dead. Okay. But at the same time, you just have so much fun coming from the progression of this script. And as they go to each pub, you see them become more and more drunk, and it feels so real and it feels authentic. But then they encounter what they encounter, like full-on sci-fi, and the performances. That's one thing I want to hit on. In all of Edgar Wright's films, he always gets great performances out of his actors. But if you go behind the scenes and you saw what they had to do, they're having to act more and more drunk as the movie goes. And so the method acting behind that from some of the actors is just incredible. I love this movie. I really do. Not quite on the level of the other movies in the trilogy, maybe not even on the level of his other films in general, but I still think The World's End is worth talking about as a great movie. I think it's great. And finally, Last Night in Soho, Thomas and McKenzie, Anya Taylor-Joy, 2021. That's why we're doing this list. I loved this movie. I really did. But I will say, out of all of his third acts, talking mostly about the films that I love, not necessarily Fistful of Fingers, Last Night in Soho may have the weakest because it goes so far in a drastically different direction than what the first two acts were giving us. Austin, what's this movie about? It's a young girl. She's passionate about fashion design, but she's able to enter the 1960s where she encounters her idol, a dazzling wannabe singer played by Anya Taylor-Joy. You also have Matt Smith and Terrence Stamp, Diana Rigg, a really great cast. What makes this movie special, really, it's the visuals. The visuals are spectacular. When you're transported into the 60s, you see this world come to life. The color grading, the cinematography, the transitions between scenes, and we saw all of that on display in the trailer, but it's even better in the movie. And I loved the beginning. Every time she goes to the 60s, then she starts to become more and more obsessed, right? It's becoming inspiration for her fashion design. It's making her want to change her style. Then the mystery starts to unfold, and you see that Last Night in Soho is going to go in a very different, more horror-based direction. Now, this movie gives us scares. Were the scares scaring me? Not necessarily, but I appreciated what it was trying to do. Absolutely loved the visuals in those moments. But again, you have that third act that just rushes through a lot of plot points, gives you a couple reveals. One I predicted, one major reveal I did not, so I love that. And a satisfying conclusion. I just wish it was as strong as those first two acts. The build-up, slowly working your way, building up the story, the characters, getting you invested emotionally. Regardless, it does come together to create a fun, and I mean a really fun experience. And even though it may not measure up to a few of the Edgar Wright movies of old, again, I sound like a broken record here. I'm going to put Last Night in Soho on the great tier. I genuinely thought it was a great movie, guys. I really, really did. So as you can see here, this is ridiculous, man. Edgar Wright is such a good director. Let's rank these movies at the bottom. Fistful of Fingers, unfortunately. And we're going to put The World's End at the 6th spot. I think I preferred Last Night in Soho. Just the originality, a tiny bit more on the awesome tier. At number 4, let's go Baby Driver. I put Hot Fuzz slightly above Baby Driver. That rewatch just really did it for me. At number 2, and this is going to shock a lot of people, I may like Scott Pilgrim more than others, but I think Scott Pilgrim is a brilliant action, comic booky, video game type movie, and it's so distinct from anything else. But, number 1, it's Shaun of the Dead. What it did for the zombie genre, what it did for satires in general, a brilliant film. I mean, I love everything about this movie. I love everything about Edgar Wright. I need to know, what do you guys think down below? What do you feel is his best movie, his worst movie? What is your tier list if you like these tier lists and you want to see more? I'm really enjoying doing these directors tier lists. So if you have another recommendation, please let me know. Appreciate you guys for watching. Stay tuned. More reviews and live streams and videos to come this weekend. And if you want to subscribe, we're almost to 100K. I'll see you soon.